Child labor occurs when children are forced to take up work at an age they need to study and enjoy the phase of innocence. Child labor leads to the loss of childhood and escalates the exploitation of children in various forms. India faces situations where children are forced to work under adverse conditions. Despite laws against child labor, many children remain exploited as cheap labor as the authorities are unable to implement strict laws and actions to protect children. Society and lawmakers must eradicate child labor in India.
Winston Churchill, one of the 20th century's most prominent statesmen, also left behind a large body of writing. His works include an autobiography in which he describes his adventurous years as an officer and war correspondent, a comprehensive biography of his ancestor, the first Duke of Marlborough, and a multi-volume work about the First and Second World Wars. The books are characterized by colorful narration but also by objectivity. Winston Churchill's magnificent and epoch-making speeches during World War II also belong to his most important written works.
The Renaissance, or the revival of classical Greco-Roman learning, inspired and encouraged people to question and challenge long-established ideas and institutions that had been imposed on them by the church and their kings. They refused to blindly accept the dictates of their rulers and the church. They demanded to know the truth based on logic and reason and rejected everything that did not satisfy the yardstick of reason. This new spirit of rationalism led to the rise of scientific temper and the spirit of inquiry. This scientific temper and the desire to inquire or seek the truth led to new and varied developments in the fields of art, architecture, sculpture, painting, literature, science and technology.
Oceans are the lifeblood of planet Earth and mankind. The humankind depends on the marine resources for its survival. They are also essential for the economic prosperity, social well-being and quality of life. Oceans have extensive deposits of oil reserves. Besides a major fishing ground, it helps in generating unconventional energy, development of many ports and harbors for trade activities. Coastal tourism also attracts people around the world, thereby contributing to the economy of many countries.
Parents often concentrate only on their children's physical needs. They dress up wounds and injuries and feed their kids with nutritious food. However, they often fail to notice the crumbling mental health of their child. This is because they do not think mental health is essential. Even among elders, one fails to see their psychological well-being. It is due to a lack of awareness among people. Therefore, one must be able to identify the signs regarding mental illness. A laughing person is not always a happy person. Never brush off mental illness as a taboo, instead pay attention and save people's life.
All the universal rights are important in their own way, and they should be understood in the historical context. For thousands of years in the history of human civilization and right till the signing of the Declaration, such rights were not available to very large sections of humanity in different parts of the world. Slavery was prevalent in the Middle East, people were and still continue to be imprisoned without trial. Racial discrimination was practiced against the black population in USA, South Africa and many other countries of the world. Women did not have the right to vote even in some of the advanced European countries like Switzerland. Bonded labor still prevails in many parts of the world and the workers in socialist states do not have the right to form trade unions or go on strike. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights seek to remove all political and social inequalities and disabilities. They exercise a kind of moral pressure on governments to reform their laws in accordance with the principles laid down in those documents.
Much of nature photography is made for scientific, travel and cultural publications, but many times, they are considered the finest examples of fine art photography, where aesthetics become a picture's main value. The aim of nature photography is to transmit the splendor of our most magnificent natural environments, nature and national parks, and the creatures who live in them. For wildlife and nature photographers, it takes a great understanding of different factors, in order to capture these moments, the way they intended to.
The universe is made up of thousands of millions of galaxies, large clouds of dust and gas called nebulae, and the space between them. No one knows the size of the universe, although it has been estimated to have a radius of 10,000 million light-years. This may not be correct, as it could continue infinitely in all directions. We do know, however, that the galaxies are moving away from each other at a very great speed. This means that the universe is expanding all the time. Many astronomers believe that the universe has been expanding since the time it was formed seems to be between 10 and 20,000 million years old.
Snakes and lizards usually live in hot countries. The reason that reptiles like warm places is because they're cold-blooded. This does not really mean that their blood is completely cold, but that they cannot keep themselves warm like birds and mammals can. Reptiles' bodies can only be as warm as their surroundings. If it is warm, they become active, but if it is cool, they become sluggish and lazy. There are only a few types of snake and lizard in cooler countries such as Britain, and they always seem to seek out the warmest place they can find, such as a rock or a garden wall, warmed by the sun. When the weather becomes colder, they spend their time in hibernation. Amphibians, animals such as frogs and salamander, are also cold-blooded animals, and so are fish.
Obesity has become a big concern for the youth of today's generation. Obesity is defined as a medical condition in which an individual gains excessive body fat. When the body mass index, BMI, of a person is over 30, the person is termed as obese. Obesity can be a genetic problem or a disorder that is caused due to unhealthy lifestyle habits of a person. Physical inactivity and the environment in which an individual lives are also the factors that leads to obesity. It is also seen that when some individuals are in stress or depression, they start cultivating unhealthy eating habits which eventually leads to obesity. Medications like steroids is yet another reason for obesity.
Carnivores are animals that eat other animals. The word carnivore is derived from Latin and literally means meat eater. Wild cats such as lions and tigers are examples of vertebrate carnivores, as are snakes and sharks, while invertebrate carnivores include sea stars, spiders, and ladybugs. Obligate carnivores are those that rely entirely on animal flesh to obtain their nutrients. Examples of obligate carnivores are members of the cat family, such as lions and cheetahs. Facultative carnivores are those that also eat non-animal food in addition to animal food. Note that there is no clear line that differentiates facultative carnivores from omnivores. Dogs would be considered facultative carnivores.
Avocados contain carotenoids, in and of themselves. And thanks to their fat content, you can get good absorption of the carotenoids that they contain. However, if you happen to be consuming an avocado-free meal or snack that contains very little fat yet rich amounts of carotenoids, some added avocado might go a long way in improving your carotenoid absorption and vitamin A nourishment. Salad greens, including romaine lettuce and mixed greens like kale, chard, and spinach are great examples of very low-fat, carotenoid-rich foods that might be eaten alone but would have more of their carotenoid richness transferred over into your body with the help of some added avocado.
Birdwatching and related ecotourism is a major economic force in many parts of the country. On a less quantitative level, birds provide humans with pleasure, joy, and spiritual inspiration merely by their presence. Birds are also excellent indicators of environmental health. Before the canary in the coal mine was a cliché, underground workers really did take canaries with them to provide early detection against carbon monoxide and other gases. In the natural world, because they are relatively abundant, easily observed, and have a rapid metabolism and high position on the food chain, birds can provide clues to otherwise difficult to detect processes. Declines in peregrine falcons and bald eagles provided important information about the dangers and spread of DDT and heavy metals. Today, changes in bird populations can tell us a great deal about the impacts of climate change, drought, weather, and habitat change in the United States and around the world.
Organismal ecological studies focus on specific, individual organisms. Scientists will examine very particular organisms and all of their specific interactions with their physical environment and other organisms. Zoologists, for example, are organismal ecologists that study animals. Many will pick a single species of animals, like scientists who study killer whales specifically, for example, or some may look at groups of species, like scientists who study sharks in general.
They may study animal behavior, animal interactions with biotic and abiotic factors and how these factors change or affect those behaviors. However, it isn't just the study of animals. Any organism can be studied within organismal biology, including bacteria, fungi and plants.
Are smart work and shortcut are similar? To answer in all honesty, no, they are not. Sure, shortcuts can make your work easier, but smart work is not equivalent to the modern day finding unethical shortcuts. Smart workers induce alternatives and easier ways to do things, but that does not necessarily make them lazy or not reliable. It is they are smart enough to find their way through the alternatives and work the better way out. They usually tend to find smoother ways that are not all that time-consuming and yet do the trick just the right direction. Or in other words, it can also be said that it requires specific knowledge and practice to execute any work smartly with minimal error. They find more natural, refined alternatives, and that makes the job more convenient and simplified to cope with and work on.
The invention of pottery is one of the great technological innovations in human history. The recognition that fire could be used to transform soft clay into impermeable ceramics represented a cognitive shift in the way people engaged with the material world around them. Until recently, archaeologists usually regarded pottery as being associated with agriculture. Pottery usage among hunter-gatherers was considered somewhat anomalous and counterintuitive. Fragile pots did not seem to have a place in the mobile lifestyles thought to characterize most human existence before the advent of farming villages during the Neolithic, from about 10,000 years ago in the eastern Mediterranean.
Change management is defined as the methods and manners in which a company describes and implements change within both its internal and external processes. This includes preparing and supporting employees, establishing the necessary steps for change, and monitoring pre- and post-change activities to ensure successful implementation. Significant organizational change can be challenging. It often requires many levels of cooperation and may involve different independent entities within an organization. Developing a structured approach to change is critical to help ensure a beneficial transition while mitigating disruption. Change is usually found for human reasons. The promoters of the change did not attend to the healthy, real and predictable reactions of normal people to disturbance of their routines. Effective communication is one of the most important success factors for effective change management. All involved individuals must understand the progress through the various stages and see results as the change cascades.
Despite the complicated and poorly documented domestication histories of most vegetatively propagated plants, some common phenotypic characteristics can be proposed for cultivars of diverse crop types, including grasses, herbs and tuberous plants. Even though archaeobotanical, biological, Ecological and genetic information is often incomplete. These phenotypic commonalities can be tentatively compared with the domestication syndrome in sexually reproduced crops. Syndrome traits comprise those associated with early domestication common to all derived varieties rather than improvement diversification traits that have arisen in only some regional varieties.
Measurement is the basis of all important scientific study. It plays an important role in our daily life also. While finding your height, buying milk for your family, timing the race completed by your friend and so on, you need to make measurements. Measurement answers questions like, how long, how heavy and how fast. Measurement is about assigning a number to a characteristic of an object or event which can be compared with other objects or events. It is defined as the determination of the size or magnitude of a quantity.
The Olympic Games are an international sports festival that began in ancient Greece. The original Greek Games were staged every fourth year for several hundred years, until they were abolished in the early Christian era. The revival of the Olympic Games took place in 1896, and since then they have been staged every fourth year, except during World War I and World War II, 1916, 1940, 1944. Perhaps the basic difference between the ancient and modern Olympics is that the former was the ancient Greeks' way of saluting their gods, whereas the modern games are a manner of saluting the athletic talents of citizens of all nations. The original Olympics featured competition in music, oratory, and theater performances as well. The modern games have a more expansive athletic agenda, and for 2.5 weeks they are supposed to replace the rancor of international conflict with friendly competition. In recent times, however, that lofty ideal has not always been attained.
In order to avoid confusion, scientists discuss thermodynamic values in reference to a system and its surroundings. Everything that is not a part of the system constitutes its surroundings. The system and surroundings are separated by a boundary. For example, if the system is 1 mole of a gas in a container, then the boundary is simply the inner wall of the container itself. Everything outside of the boundary is considered as surroundings, which would include the container itself. The boundary must be clearly defined, so one can clearly say whether a given part of the world is in the system or in the surroundings. If matter is not able to pass across the boundary, then the system is said to be closed, otherwise, it is open. A closed system may still exchange energy with the surroundings unless the system is an isolated one, in which case neither matter nor energy can pass across the boundary.
Gravitational forces between molecules are comparatively small relative to intermolecular or interatomic forces. Since phase change is controlled by intermolecular forces, the rate of melting or freezing should be the same under microgravity as it is under normal gravity conditions, provided that thermal and solute fields are the same. However, phase change happens to be indirectly influenced by gravity due to convection in the liquid phase, which propagates nuclei and enhances heat transfer, also changing the thermal contact conductance between the heated, or cooled, wall and the phase change material.
Astronomy had a major impact on ancient peoples, and it's pretty obvious why whenever you look up at a starry sky. Modern cities and lighting mean that few of us have a view of the dark sky, so most people are not as aware of the night sky now as they used to be. The monuments that ancient peoples left behind stand as proof of their interest in, and knowledge of, astronomy. Astronomy stimulated science in ancient societies. The cycles of the heavens, the predictability of the planets and the regularity of the motion of the sun in the sky inspired people into thinking about time, about changes and ways to predict them, and started them thinking about simple physical laws, and about things which weren't so obvious, such as comets. I'm not going to talk about other sorts of impact in astronomy. When astronomers have something like an impending collision with an asteroid to tell the public about, it can be very significant.
The first edition of the Asian Games was held in New Delhi in March 1951. The aftermath of the Second World War meant Japan were barred from the 1948 Olympics in London. They were not invited to the founding meeting of the Asian Games Federation in 1949, but the country was allowed to compete in the inaugural Asian Games. South Korea did not participate, however, due to the Korean War, which had started the previous year and would last until 1953. The Games were officially opened by Indian President Rajendra Prasad at the Dhyan Chand National Stadium. A total of 489 athletes from 11 national Olympic committees competed in 12 sports. Japan topped the medal table with 24 gold, 21 silver and 15 bronze medals. A total of 169 medals were awarded.
The Himalayas face many challenges, and governments are under pressure to provide for their people and secure their natural heritage. Forests are strained as demand continues to grow for timber and food crops. Protected areas are becoming isolated pockets, and international criminal networks are emptying forests of rare wildlife to feed the voracious illegal market. The impact of global climate change is melting the once mighty Himalayas at a rate faster than ever recorded in human history, jeopardizing a vital source of fresh water for billions of people in Asia.